Welcome to Her Own Boss, the podcast and community designed to help you find your inner entrepreneur. Her Own Boss is created by Anissa, Ben, Sarah, Lucy, Nikki, and me, Megan, as we start our careers and learn from the inspiring women who can help us along the way.
Hi everyone, this is your host Nikki and welcome to this special episode of Her Own Boss with Dan Reed and Ruth Marsden. For our Father's Day special, Dan and Ruth share with us how they are working towards gender parity and to overcome gender stereotypes of parenthood, both in their careers and within their own families, while also sharing with us their advice for 20-somethings about navigating and owning your career. Ruth Marsden is the founder of Bettercup, a sustainable menstrual cup business, and mother to Jet and Nova. Dan Reed is a marketing professional and the founder of Career Dad, an online community and podcast dedicated to connecting dads who are as passionate about raising their children as they are about their career. Dan is also the father to Theo and Xanthe. I hope you enjoy and happy Father's Day.
This episode is sponsored both by Rise, created by Barclays, and Barclays Eagle Labs. Rise and Eagle Labs are on a mission to support female founders shape the future of entrepreneurship by providing access to networks, mentorship, and training. Search Rise, created by Barclays, or Barclays Eagle Labs to find out more.
Hi Dan, hi Ruth.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
All well. All good. What's not to like?
Love it. All right, so we start every episode with a round of quick fire icebreaker questions. So I'm going to reel them off. Don't think too much. Answer with the first thing that comes into your head. We'll start. I'll go Ruth Dan, okay? Ready?
Yeah.
All right, first one is night out or night in?
Night in.
Night in.
Okay, second question, board games or video games?
Board games.
Video games.
Okay, and then the last one is a fill in the blank. So if you were competing in the Olympics, you would compete in blank.
High jump.
Table tennis.
Wow, you both answered that so quickly.
I just panicked. No.
There we go.
So have either of you ever done high jump or table tennis before?
No, I have no idea why that came into my head.
That's good though. That's ambitious. I like it. Yeah, I can dabble with a paddle, but yeah, I'm not Olympic quality.
I love that. When I was like putting this question together, I think my answer would have to be figure skating, not because I can do it, but because I think it would be so cool.
They're all pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing uncool about being an Olympian.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're not actually here to talk about the Olympics, surprisingly, but I'm really excited to have you both on, so welcome, and a special welcome as well to Dan. You are our first male guest on Her Own Boss
That's
podcast.
amazing.
No
Thank
pressure.
you.
So I wanted to start off just by asking, because you both have really cool sort of businesses or ventures, asking why you started each of them. So Ruth, if we could start with why you started Bettercup, and then Dan will go on to you and Career Dad.
Yeah, I was on a kind of journey myself to trying to make our house a bit more sustainable, reducing our waste and plastic and all those kind of things. And I got to think about my period and how much plastic it's producing and how much I'm sending to landfill every month. And I'd heard of menstrual cups and just thought they sounded really weird, not something I'd want to get involved with. They just sounded a bit unhygienic and a bit hippie. And so I kind of just pigeonholed it all in that category. And then my sister started using one and loved it. And I was like, oh, so I gave one a go and loved it. And it completely changed my whole period experience. And I'd always had a kind of back of my mind niggling, would love to start a business, running my own thing, being my own boss. And then, when I started using one, I thought it's still not mainstream. So clearly there's a lot more that could be done to be bringing them more into the mainstream market. And then I was chatting to my sister who lives in Zimbabwe. She's been there for 12 years and she works at a school. And each month the girls there tend to miss a week of school while they're on their period because they don't have any suitable sanitary wear. So she was describing what she wished they had. She, having been in Zim for 12 years, she hasn't heard of menstrual cups. So she was saying, I just wish there was like a tampon that they could reuse. So when we donate to them, it actually lasts longer than just that one period, or even just that one 3-hour stint within a period.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, funny you should say that. So I told her about menstrual cups, and she was like, this could totally be the answer. And I'd kind of talked myself out of starting a business just because I thought, who am I to start a business? I have no experience at all. I went to drama school and then was an actress before having children. So no business experience at all. But when I talked to my sister and realized the need, I felt like, who am I to not start it? Like, this is something that needs to happen. And so I just need to kind of put my own insecurities aside and just go for it. So Bettercup was born. So the idea is that for each menstrual cup we sell, we donate one to someone that needs it most. And my sister's school in Zimbabwe, that was our first partnership. But we now work with all sorts of different charities around the world, UK based as well as in Zim, with schools and other charities, with safe houses for women that have come out of domestic violence, and just anywhere where someone the last thing they should be thinking about is how on earth they're going to make their period work the next month. We're donating to. So that's Bettercup.
That's amazing. And Dan, how about you starting Career Dad?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a weird one for me because I still have my kind of full-on day job, so I'm kind of like a fake entrepreneur, I guess. But I guess for career,
side hustle.
Yeah, exactly. Career Dad for me came about after the birth of my second child. So I think without going on a psychologist's armchair, that I didn't have the most stable upbringing as a kid. And so growing up, I knew that if I got married and if I had kids, that I wanted to kind of provide what I necessarily didn't have. And then I met my now wife at university. We've been together a long time, and that all kind of fell into place. And then we had our first child. He's 7 this summer. And I'd started my kind of corporate career at that point. But then what happened is, when you get good at work in a corporate environment, you get promoted, which is fantastic. But then you get more work, and then you get promoted again. And it's just this cycle that continues, which is fab. The problem is that I found myself being away from my wife and my son at that point, just my son, more than I wanted to be. And it was through my choosing. It wasn't like, with my dad, where I could only see him every other weekend. I was choosing to be in London, in Germany, wherever it was. And I really struggled with that. And a lot of guilt and anxiety around, well, I want to grow this career, but I also want to be there for my kids. And how do I do both? But to the point where doing something purely for me wasn't an option. So even I quite like, my running and my cycling and thing, but then I'm not spending time with my wife or my kids, and I'm already not spending enough time with my wife and my kids, so I can't do anything for me. And it was when then my daughter was born, the summer of 2019, unplanned home birth, but by the very nature of an unplanned home birth, it all happened very quickly. And that day I was meant to be in the office. I had a few really important meetings lined up, and it all stopped. It all stopped because my daughter was born. I had 3 weeks paternity leave, and after about 7 or 8 days, I just wanted to check in with work to see how everyone was, because for me, work's a social thing as much as a work thing. And I was just met with, you need to be there for your wife. You need to be there for your kids. Work will still be here. It was basically switch off that tap. And I understand it was coming from a good place, but just, I know how I operate, and I don't operate in that way. I take my personal life to work, and anyone who works with me knows that. And I take my work into my personal life, and I find it hard to have that hard split. So when someone said to me, you are not allowed to do this work thing, which is something I enjoy, that really hit me harder than I thought it would have done. And so I was just sat there thinking, where is a space that I can look for dads that is about work and dads? And I got hit with two things. It was either the comical buffoon dad that can't get anything right, sends the kid out with 2 left shoes and all of that. And I thought, that doesn't resonate with me. Or it was how work is this terrible, terrible thing, and we need to get better at work-life balance and basically to be a better father. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm talking about either. I want to look at people who want to talk about work as a positive thing, but also parenting. And I couldn't find it. So I thought, I'm just going to put those two words together, career and dad, and see what happens. And the response was just fantastic. And it's kind of grown from there, really.
I love it. I think both those stories are so interesting because you've both kind of been motivated by these really taboo subjects. I mean, things like periods and menstruation definitely don't get enough airtime, but equally, Dan, I would agree with you. I'd say that fatherhood and the different ways it can look and be for different people, we also don't talk about enough. And I think what's great as well is that you're both in very different ways kind of working towards gender parity, which is something that's so important to us on this podcast.
Definitely.
And so my next question is kind of about, you've both touched on it a little bit already, but when you were younger, what did you want to be when you were older? Did you kind of envision what you're doing now? And how did family, or didn't family, sort of play into that vision for your future?
So I wanted to be an actress growing up. I went to performing arts school, then went to drama school and worked as an actress when I actually left performing arts school, went straight to London to start working. So when I graduated, I'd worked in the industry for about 3 years before getting pregnant with my first boy. And I was in denial. I was really excited to be pregnant, but I was in complete denial about what I thought might be the end of my career before it even started. The industry is definitely, you've got to eat, sleep and breathe your art and your craft. There's almost a kind of one-upmanship sometimes of how many weddings have you missed to film, and how many funerals have you not been to for a play. And there's that real, like, you've got to be all in. So I was slowly, my bump was getting bigger, and I was in a play when I was about 24 weeks pregnant. I remember kind of breathing in, putting on my jeans, just kind of pretending that it wasn't happening. Didn't tell my agent I was having a baby right through till I'd had my boy. He was 2 days old, and they sent me a audition in London. I remember crying to my husband and being like, I could do it. I think I could take him. He's 2 days old, but you could come and we could put him in the buggy and we could make it work. And he was like, I think you just need to tell them that you've had a baby and you deserve a bit of time off. So I did that, and then they dropped me, and I didn't work. And they said the next day, they dropped me the next day, and they said it was because they were doing kind of, they give you the spiel about they're shifting things around. But the reality was I wasn't far enough into my career to be able to start being picky about what I wanted to do. And I had said in the email, I'd said, I'm not going to want to miss, I'm breastfeeding, so I'm going to need to work around that. And I'm not going to want to miss bedtimes and bath times as we start getting into that routine. So we need to kind of start thinking about how I take jobs. And I just wasn't really in a position to pick and choose because I was only being offered, a certain amount of work. But it ended up being the best thing that ever happened. My son completely flipped my whole world upside down, but in all the best ways. And I think I was getting a lot of my kind of worth from my work, but not necessarily in the right way. So in the same way that when I wasn't getting jobs, that was really affecting my self-worth negatively. So becoming a mum just strips you raw, and you just realize so much more about who you are and who you are just as you and as a human. But I also lost some of myself. So because I wasn't working, I love to be creative. So I did feel like that side of me got lost along the way. And then where I told you about Bettercup, that idea came after I'd had my girl. And then when she was 2 and Jet was 4, I started my period again, and the whole experience was very different post-children. And that's when I discovered menstrual cups. So yeah, my jobs along the way have kind of changed and bent to suit where I'm at in my life. And I think only now in my 30s, with my children being that little bit older, I mean, they're still only 6 and 4, but looking back now, you see the way your life has worked, and that all these different things have kind of led to where you are now. So yeah, it's not at all what I thought I'd be doing when I was younger. When I was younger, I was such a prude, and I would not say the word period. I'd absolutely cringe to my core even talking about anything like that. I remember going to my mum when I started my period and being like, I've
done something.
And like couldn't finish the sentence. And I really don't want that for my children. Jet is just as equipped with periods as Nova is, and that's a real passion of mine, is family now that aren't cringed out at all by it. But it's not at all where I thought I'd be, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
That's so cool. For me, So my day job is digital marketing within financial services. Who grew up thinking that was going to be the dream? Yeah, I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do as a kid. I was kind of one of those really low self-esteem kids that hid it through being over the top, gregarious, louder than life. So actually, I always thought and wanted to go down the acting route. I thought that'd be like fantastic. When we did the thing at the start, board games, video games, and I was very quickly video games. That was another thing that if I was kind of 14, 15 now, I would be pushing, saying that's what I want to do. So actually, if we had like acting and video games on one side, where I actually thought I was going to end up was in law. So I did all of my kind of GCSEs, my work experience at a solicitor's firm, my A-levels were all geared around law. And then when I did more work experience, I realized that I just didn't like it. So what that led to is I actually just didn't want to go to university. I just wanted to start work. And again, parents kind of had other views, and I still at that point really, really cared what their views were. And so I just went to university because so I did a degree in English and American literature. So I managed to do nothing for 3 years, scrape a 2-2, and then think, right, I now need to work. So I just got different jobs really. Went back to do a master's degree, and then that kind of helped launch that career, say in financial services. Now I am about to move on to tech company, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I never thought I'd be doing this, but I didn't know what I did think. My wife always says that I'm kind of recklessly optimistic. Which I kind of agree with and almost like that descriptor, because I kind of have the audacity and I guess ego to some level that we are all capable of having a meaningful impact on the world and on other people. And so I guess that's where I still don't really know what I want to do, but I know what I want to do is to try and help as many people as possible. And it sounds a bit kind of hippie, but just to try and make people as a whole happier. I guess that's one of the reasons that I am so career focused, because I think the higher up that chain I go, the more influence I'm going to have to do things as I think are the right things to do. One of the things I'm going to be canvassing the new company that I go to about is parental leave, particularly paternal leave, and things like bereavement leave. I spoke to one dad who was on my podcast, and he was saying that he, unfortunately, he had his daughter, and she lived for 2 days, and he had to arrange her funeral on paternity leave because there was nothing else for him. There was no support. And I think that actually, we talk about gender parity, and one of the big blockers is that societally and financially, dads are not part of the equation. And I think part of that is that we need to really stop celebrating dads for doing basic parenting. I'm not actually, the more that I talk about this, the more that some dads really switch off, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to give you a round of applause for quote unquote babysitting your kids. That's not your being a parent. Let's stop celebrating that. And, let's stop demonizing mums for doing what we would celebrate dads to do. And if we get to that level, then actually we can start looking at some of the wider issues as well. So did I think that is what I would be doing as a kind of 13, 14, 15-year-old? Absolutely not. But on the other hand, I did think that I'd be doing something that tried to make a difference. So maybe.
First of all, I think that's really interesting, you guys going through your career paths, because we talk about it all the time on the podcast about how oftentimes when you're like at school and uni, you have no idea what you want to do. But I think some of the points you've brought up about how throughout your career, the expectations of you in terms of family have been very much gendered. And, Ruth, you being a woman, there was, oh my God, she's pregnant, she's had a baby, maybe we can't represent her anymore. And then, Dan, you going into this company and knowing that there's not time for dads to take off to take care of their children. I just think it's fascinating. And if I kind of bring in my own experiences, so I'm not a parent, but my mum is kind of to use a very outdated term, the breadwinner. So she's like a career mum. She's always had her career, always worked. And my dad has been primary caretaker. And so for me, that's always been normal. But then as you grow older, you realize that actually that's more exceptional than perhaps it should be. And I know that, sometimes my mum, I think all parents feel the guilt when they're not around their children, but perhaps had to feel more guilt. And then people get a bit confused when they saw my dad in the playground with me and my sister. So I'd love to kind of hear more about your experiences of how you deal with these gendered expectations in your career, but then equally how you deal with them around other parents.
I mean, yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. I think so. In work, for me, it's around I say when we were in offices, it's leaving loudly. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. So if there was a sports day or a meeting or something at my kid's school and it's 3:00, I'll stand up and go, I'm off. If you need me, I've got my phone. It won't be on at this time, but I'll also be on in the evening. So I'm a real advocate as well of 9 to 5 is just such an outdated method of working. 9 to 5 was revolutionary in the 1820s to stop child labor. Now that was fantastic and needed, but we don't need it now. And actually, if you think about kind of corporate company metrics, they're never, when you write your objectives for the year, it's not I'm going to sit at my desk from 9 to 5, because that doesn't achieve anything. It's about the output. So if we start switching the way that we work to output based, whilst meeting, business needs, customer needs, and all of that good stuff, that actually helps break down a load of these barriers. So when my son comes home from school at 3:00, I will, if I'm on a call, I'll say, hey, can we just have 5 minutes? I just want to go and say hi to him and then I'll be back. Or that we'll go and hang out and watch TV if I don't have a meeting, but then I'll log back on at 8:00 once they're asleep and do a bit of work. So it's about utilizing the 24 hours that we do have. So I think that in work, just being very loud and vocal up and down. So I'm very vocal to my boss about what I'm doing. She's incredibly supportive, and to my team and the wider team outside of work. It's really hard. It's really hard because it's what battles do you pick? Pre-COVID, I was picking up lunch, and I wanted to go out for lunch, and so I took my son, and at the time my baby daughter, like 3 months old, with me, just the three of us. And as a 3-month-old baby, rarely they do what you want them to do. So I'm stood up, kind of rocking her backwards and forth, eating a sandwich. My son's sat like drinking his hot chocolate or whatever. Everyone's cool. And yeah, this woman came up to me and just said, "You're doing a fantastic job." And I'm like, how? It comes from a good place, but if that was my wife, there wouldn't even be an eyelid being battered. And it's really hard because you don't want to say, well, what do you mean by that? If this was my, but at the same time, you want to challenge. And, so I just said, "Oh, thank you, but I'm just being a parent." And it's just trying to reinforce that when the expectation of dads is so low and they have to do so little to be rewarded so highly, that's a real problem for me.
Yeah, my husband just says, "Yeah, I'm their dad," and just kind of shrugs it off, like, "Yeah, I'm their dad." Just like time and time again, in the playground, at the coffee shop, on the school run, like every day. And then I find I'll be walking up and maybe one of them's crying, and I read into it, but I feel like I then get the eyebrows raised. Whereas my husband would get there, "Oh, wow, aren't you doing an amazing job with that crying baby?" I get there, "Oh, can't you keep her baby from crying?"
Absolutely. And it's on the one hand, it's so little, it's such a small thing, but actually it's not, because it's that societal kind of expectation or perception that then blows up into, well, of course my wife won't go to London for that meeting if the school by default is going to call her to pick up the sick child, despite me working from home more than she does. And then that's where it really becomes an exponential problem. So yeah, I feel a bit torn by it externally, because you want to make the point. And I think, Ruth, what you said and what your husband, I think is fantastic. I'll definitely have to adopt that instead of having this internal dialogue where I'm mute and someone's staring at me. But yeah, I think actually in both instances, then for me, it's just about being loud and being proud.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think as well, yeah, if you're someone that feels confident enough to be loud, you need to do that for the people that then will feel like you're giving them permission to say, oh, okay, good, because I've really wanted to get to sports day and I didn't think I could. And the kind of knowing that you're taking the responsibility of leading the way is such an amazing step to be able to take on behalf of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it's been a bit different just because neither of us have ever had a normal, quote unquote, normal job. So from dating, 15 years ago through till now, we've been musician and actress and then producer and YouTuber, and now my husband's now starting the tech business, so he's running his own thing. So now he has employees, which is something we've had a lot of conversations about. It feels like a real privilege that from the beginning we can set the atmosphere and the dynamic of his business, and straight away it's flexible working and go to your children first, come to work after, and just really setting that standard that he'd expect from his company. And it's been amazing to be able to work on that together and being able to think, well, as parents, what would frustrate us or what has frustrated us, and how can we make that look different, rather than being like, oh, I guess it's okay that you go home to your children, to celebrate that that's what you're doing, and to celebrate that you're working and you've got a family and you love both. Because I'm totally the same as you, Dan. I'm so passionate about what I do and I love my work, and I make a real thing of saying to the children that I love to go to work, and I miss them, and I'm sad I don't get to see them, but mummy loves her work, and mummy's so proud that she gets to work, and this is what I do. And I talk to them about what jobs they might do when they're older. And I think you can teach your children whatever you want to teach them, but really they just copy what they see you do.
I think that's so, like, language is so important. And even, with my son, where he'll say, oh, do you have to go to work? And I say, no, I get to go to work. And it's just those little things, because I think, and we see it manifest in adults. Right? I was thinking about this the other day, right? Because sometimes people will say, particularly my father will say about my son, oh, maybe he needs to kind of toughen up a little bit, needs to kind of man up a little bit. And I just think, like, actually, why don't we just switch that narrative and just say, be who you want to be, do what you want to do, as long as it's legal and ideally safe. Why not? Like, why not? And so, I think that kind of, this is a privilege. If you don't enjoy something, there are some things that you have to do in life, but there's a lot of things that we feel we have to do and we actually don't. If you don't like your job, please do something about it, because life is too short and work is too long. And I think having those conversations at a young age and instilling that is so important.
What advice would you both have then for someone, so say maybe someone my age, or a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are kind of in their 20s. If you don't have children, but I think it's still important to have that work-life balance, how do you start those conversations with a manager, for example? If you don't have a manager that's accepting or kind of open to that sort of balance, how do you start that conversation?
I was in that situation, and I created a test. So I said, what I want to do, I want to run a trial. I think that by doing this is going to improve either my performance or my happiness, or both. And this was about working from home, right? And so I want to do a test for a month, and I want to measure it, and I want to see where we get to the end. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I think we're going to have a better output at the end than we do now. Who can say no to that? Who says, no, I don't want to see if we can improve things? And so that worked for me, and that ultimately worked for our team, and we ended up with a bit more flexibility. So I'd say, ultimately, though, do you want to work for someone long term that is going to be a blocker? No, but that is something practical that I did, and it worked for me. On the kind of first point that you said around what advice would you give to kind of 20-year-olds? I think that, and things might have changed, but I don't think they've changed too much because I'm not far out of my 20s. But when I started work, there was this mentality of, you keep work and life separate. You don't mix the two. And also you have to be employed somewhere really for 2 years before you move on. Otherwise you look flighty. And I remember being in a job that I would cry every morning before going to work because I hated it that much. And I'd only been there for like 4 months. And I was thinking, I've got to do another year and a half of this. that is nuts. That is just insane. And the last thing, because I would talk about this for another hour and I won't, I thought that if I did not achieve certain things by certain arbitrary times and ages, I had failed. That mixed with being very competitive, realizing that actually the only competition we should have is with ourselves, and the arbitrary dates that people say you need to get married by, have kids by, have a certain income by, own a house by, it's just all nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you're talking directly to me right now, Dan.
We can pick up on that. On that. If I could really instill that message into a mid-20-something-year-old, that would be job done for me.
And that you can start again at any point.
Yeah.
There's no point where you're too far in or you're too far gone. You can start. You can completely change career. You can move to another country. You are the master of your own life. There is no rule. There's the way that society has told us to do it, but like Dan said, that's just so antiquated now. You can make a change at whatever point you want to make a change. And I think if you have an idea for something, if we are talking more in terms of the entrepreneurship, if you have an idea for something, just start. If you're looking for a sign, this is your sign. Start now. Because you think you need to be ready, or you think you need certain things in place, or financial stability. You think you need all these things set up, and really, you just need to start. And my first day doing Bettercup was just in a cafe with my computer, and I thought, I'm just going to look at what menstrual cups are even made of. I don't even know what they're made of, so I'm just going to Google that. And then I, worked out with silicone, then started Googling what silicone is. I didn't have anything to show for it by the end of the day, but I felt amazing. So I felt like I've had my first day of my next chapter, and like just starting, just doing one small step, texting one person, asking one friend that's an expert in something, writing some plans down, thinking up a business name, anything, just small things, but just start and know you can start at any point.
You should both be motivational speakers, because that whole segment there are so many quotes in my head that are popping up, and I'm like, I feel like you're talking directly to me. How, as a parent, do you think you're trying to change? Because I think one of the things, just to give a bit more context, that we talk about a lot in the podcast is confidence. And there's been loads of research to show that by adulthood, women in general, I'm not saying this is true for every individual woman, are less confident than their male counterparts. And I wonder, do you think, from what you've seen as a parent, that's learned? Do you feel like both of your children are as confident as each other? If they are, how are you going to make sure that this stays the way it is? One of your children learns to be less confident than the other.
Yeah, I think it's so hard. I think so much of it is unseen society. You learn it from society without even realizing it. Because actually, looking back, my dad was great, and he always is pushing us to ask for pay rises and promotions, and he's always like, what's the person next to you earning, and what's this, and push for that and push for that. So he talks about it a lot, and so we've definitely been encouraged at home, and so it makes you realize actually how much you've learnt outside of the home to kind of cancel out his voice. And I think as well, within the acting industry, which is obviously my main experience, women are paid so much worse, but there's no talk about it. So you just learn to kind of take what you're given and shut up, which is awful and needs to change. But there's also that feeling as well within acting that if you don't do the role, there are hundreds of people knocking on the door that will take your role before you're even out of costume. They will step straight in. And so you feel like you don't have a leg to stand on. And that because it's a passion career, that to then talk about what you're earning undermines that you're doing it because you love it.
Right.
So I think as well, that's something I took forward, where I was like, well, I'm doing Bettercup because I love it. So if I'm trying to earn a salary, does that then undermine why I'm doing it? Yeah. So I think with my children, definitely, my dad did a great job, and I'll try and continue to do that with them, of talking about earning and what you're worth, and that you can ask for things. Like, you have to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get, and you need to be bold. But yeah, I feel so passionately about speaking to them both about what they look like in society, and that my boy growing up as a white male, and what that's going to mean before he's even done anything, before he's earned anything, what that will mean. And then my daughter, because as well, although she's female, she's white, so there's a lot that's going to come to her because she's a white female. Because I think one of my misconceptions was that for us all to be treated more equally, we need to talk equally to each other. But only since having a boy and a girl have I realized how actually they are different and they will experience different things. And so I need to talk to them differently so that they then can achieve equally. And so it's just working out that struggle of what a girl needs to hear and be told and what a boy needs to hear to break the glass ceilings and to achieve what I hope they will.
That just hits so hard on so many levels, because even just on the whole salary thing, I've taken not a penny out of Career Dad, because partly I don't feel like I should, and partly because I want it to be accessible. On the whole, the equality around words and conversations. Not the last article, but the article before that I wrote was around raising sons and daughters, and the whole premise was I actually thought that I treat them the same, and actually learning that I can't, and that I have to speak to my daughter so differently, and I don't want to use the word protect, but she's not even 2. And we had people saying, oh, for a birthday, we were going to get her this doll and this pram and all. And it's like, if she chooses to have those things, that's fantastic. But I'm not going to force upon her the societal expectation that is what she should do. And I never thought I'd have to do that. I just thought, well, if I just treat them both the same, and it was such a big kind of, I won't say the word in my head, but like a head explosion of just like having to really put in so much more effort to have that equality, and then realizing that that's society, that's not just my household.
Yeah. So fascinating. And I feel like we could sit here and chat all day, and I kind of want to, but sadly we are running out of time. I have one last question for you both, and it's the question that we end every episode on. Ruth, I'll start with you and then go to Dan. And the question is, what gives you confidence?
I kind of touched on it before, but knowing why I'm doing something gives me confidence, because I think it helps me know why I'm then in the room or pitching or whatever it is I'm doing. Knowing why I'm doing it gives me the confidence to kind of remind myself of why I'm there, and helps me fake the confidence.
For me, it's removing judgment of myself and from others. And so it's almost realizing that no one actually cares what I'm doing. They're more worried about what they're doing. And so that kind of gives me almost the permission to do what I want to do, and actually just going, do I think it's okay? I'll give it a go. And if it doesn't work out, that's on me. If anyone else wants to weigh in, fine, but it's got nothing to do with them. And working through that internally really helped me externally.
I love that. Thank you both so much for agreeing to take the time to come on the podcast. I've absolutely loved it, and I can't wait for everyone to hear the episode as well.
No, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can find out more about Her Own Boss at herownboss.co.uk or by searching for us on LinkedIn and Instagram.